Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, followers, supporters, donors of HRNK, welcome to another virtual HRNK report launch. This is a report launch featuring, excuse me, one of North Korea's detention facilities. Of course, I'm Greg Scarlatoiu, Executive Director of HRNK. This is part of a project coordinated by and executed by our senior satellite imagery analyst and senior advisor, Joe Bermudez. For 12 years, Joe has been the driving force, the architect, the conductor of this project. We're very fortunate to work with him. The methodology we employed has been to combine satellite imagery and North Korea's KP testimony. Joe has built baseline surveys of detention facilities in North Korea, updating these facilities every now and then. Today, we are featuring a previously unknown facility. At least this is the first time that HRNK features this facility, Kyo-hwa-so Re-education to Labor Camp number 3 in South Sinuiju, North Korea. A city, of course, well known for being close to the border with China, across Freedom Bridge from Dandong, China. A city that has been a focal point both in terms of the market activity in North Korea, and of course, a city that is also close to escape routes. So the location of this detention facility, this prison in Sinuiju, is, of course, extraordinarily intriguing. Joe Bermudez does not need an introduction. He is a world-renowned expert on satellite imagery analysis. We are fortunate that he does this with us, scrutinizing North Korea's detention facilities. He works, of course, with CSIS on other very important issues that make the world news, political, security, military issues in particular. Joe is going to give the main presentation today. We're also joined by my colleagues, Mortwedt Oh and Doohyun Jake Kim. Mortwedt Oh has been working on this satellite imagery project for many years now, since 2014. Amanda is also Director of International Outreach and Development at HRNK. Doohyun Jake Kim joined us initially as an intern. He's now an HRNK consultant, very passionate about his work and very passionate about this particular project, our satellite imagery project. Doohyun hails from North Korea. He and his family had a miraculous escape from the north. He's well known within media circles as well for running his own YouTube program, amongst other things. And now he's with us. He's on HRNK's team. He has unique knowledge of the city of Sinuiju and this particular facility. We're very happy that you've all joined us. We're going to proceed now, Joe, with your main presentation, followed by the discussants. Joe, the floor, camera, microphone are yours.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank all of you for joining us today. I'm going to run through some of the technology that we use to produce the report and some of my analysis and why I arrived at that analysis. And then I will turn it over to Amanda and Doohyun. I encourage you to ask questions because this is how you learn, this is how I learn. And I never stop learning. That's one of the things that has become plainly obvious here at HRNK. Before I jump in, I do want to explain that while I'm making the presentation and while I did the imagery analysis, this is a cooperative project. No work of this type or of this length is the work of a single individual. Every one of the panelists here has contributed, as well as a staff of interns at HRNK who do incredible work. And you'll see that going forward in our next several reports. And for those of you who are interested, we have a number of reports lined up. It just takes time to process them and get them through the system and out to you. We encourage you to contact us, reach out to us, suggesting ideas, corrections too, by all means. If you see something that you believe is to be incorrect, please reach out to us. The idea, as Craig has said, is that we're producing a series of baseline reports on North Korean prison facilities of all types. The effort here is to document these in as much detail as we can. So going forward in the future, people can be accountable for their actions, and that people who have been interned in some of these camps can be assisted in the future. With that said, let me get to the presentation. I hope that you can all see my screen right now. And this shows the general location of Tucson. It is southeast of Sinuiju, as Greg had mentioned, and it's in Sinuiju Sea, the overall city of Sinuiju. And initially, as we see in this next image, this was taken in 1977. It was there as far back as that. In fact, I think here's a 1968 image showing nothing there of the prison, but interestingly, it shows the building down here. This building type is an office or school type. You can see that there's been a cleared space just south of it. And this is 1968, remember. In 1977, we see that the prison wall itself had been established. We see that guard posts have been mounted on the wall in strategic locations, and that original building is still there. And we see that the soccer pitch or soccer field is there, and that additional buildings, large buildings, support buildings have been added. This headquarters and administration and barracks area that I pointed out here is interesting. It is way larger than is necessary for the prison itself, and it still remains, and you'll see in a later image. This suggests strongly that it has an additional role. That role, and given its location, suggests that it might be a headquarters for the security force, for the county, for the province possibly. And it's something that we're investigating and hope to come to a better understanding moving forward. And please remember that this study that you're seeing right now is a baseline report. It's an initial report, and that as time goes on and we acquire additional information, especially declassified information or further former detainee information, we will update this, just like we've updated our other reports. This is an ongoing and challenging process. So this is 1977. Regrettably, we haven't been able to locate any additional imagery between high resolution imagery, that is, between 1977 and 2003, I believe it was. And let's go down here, 2002, I'm sorry. Here in 2002. So we see that changes have been made. Additional buildings have been added. These are support type buildings. Typically in other detention facilities, these are used for storage of supplies. They're used as workshops where detainees will do work like sewing, construction of furniture, things of that nature. And it also supports the agricultural fields you see around the facility. We have information that detainees are forced to do labor in the fields. This labor produces crops, some of which, a very small portion, are used for the prisoners themselves. The others are used for, I don't want to say sale, but are distributed to the rest of the county and province. We see some minor changes here. What we see in the center here, and I don't know if you can really tell, there's a tall chimney here. This type of structure with its associated buildings around it suggests a light industrial capability for the facility. One of the things that I find interesting is if you look at this area up north here, we go back to the previous image, We see there was an industrial type building with support buildings. However, in 2000, oops, sorry, my screen isn't moving as fast as I wanted. However, in 2002, that's been removed. Exactly what that was, we have yet to determine. It's one of the things we're continuing to investigate. Also notice that they've put a greenhouse in, and they've started construction of what would eventually become a livestock facility. This is part of an overall trend we see in North Korea during the late 1990s, early 2000s, because of the arduous march, the period of famine and floods in the 90s. Local organizations, whether they be government or civilian, are forced to or have resorted to local agricultural production on a much larger scale. And also at the same time, the industrial capacity of North Korea started producing larger quantities of styrene and plastic sheeting so they could produce more greenhouses, so more vegetables could be grown over a longer period of time in North Korea. As we move forward in time, you'll keep an eye on this northern area, please. Once again, we see the large greenhouse. We see that the livestock facility is just about completed. We notice that large areas have been dedicated to gardens, okay? Even within the support area and the adjacent areas. Also note the fields outside the facility. Someone had asked about the buildings in the villages that have grown up around the camp. As best we know, a lot of these are used for senior staff at the detention facility, as well as what may be a headquarters type building. And this is where a number of them live. The enlisted personnel likely live in the barracks here and here. The wall, notice that the prison has also been separated. Previously, they've been able to move here. However, they've separated from the prisoner housing and some of the administrative. So the mess hall, the clinics, things of that nature. Also, we see the raising of several buildings that were previously associated with the light industrial capabilities. In 2015, we see an additional greenhouse being constructed. We see that even more of the northern area has been dedicated to agriculture. We see also in the main part of the prison, agriculture. We see new structures for the support facility. And we see, well, you don't see it in this image in particular, but a later one you will. We see activity. We see trucks moving in here. We see personnel, things of this nature. Okay, here's 2020, last year. We see the livestock facility, there's some work there. The greenhouse has been completed. It's a pretty large greenhouse, and it supports this one here. We could see that this is a fall image. We can see the crops are ready to be harvested or in the process of being harvested. We also see continued activity in this area, which is light industrial capabilities. We see an additional greenhouse here. So they're working to, I hate to use the word self-sufficient, but they're working to support themselves and support the local economy. Notice that this yellow patch right here, this is grain that is drying on the concrete. This is typical practice in North Korea. This image is interesting because we actually see, and you'll see in a few slides, prisoners lined up here, and we see guards moving along here. You see a really clear view of the crops being dried and the various agricultural and livestock facilities. And let me just go, you can see the movement here on the ground as vehicles come in and out of the storage facilities and the support facilities. Notice the open bed truck here. Now, well, I've zoomed in here to show you the line of prisoners. Here, they're about to enter the entrance. You could see the guards standing over here. The way we can tell the difference is these are guards that are walking either to or from the entrance here. And you could see like any group of soldiers or guards, you know, formation's a little sloppy as they walk along. In this case, we see the prisoners, however, lined up in a very specific formation. We see open bed trucks. We see supplies or grain that's been harvested in stacks, probably on trailers that'll be pulled or towed. See additional personnel walking up here. Yeah. Here's a close-up showing the greenhouses that I've been mentioning. That is a very large greenhouse. Here's another one. Here's livestock facilities. We can see we see more prisoners here, okay? They're working on whatever they're doing here, and I'm not really sure. You see additional prisoners here, these little black dots. And we see this motor pool, you know, vehicle maintenance and storage area. We see another greenhouse. We see the prisoner housing. And this is very typical of North Korean prison housing. You see these barrack types buildings, and you see these little, you know, structures on either sides of them. This is a close-up of the headquarters area. This is a cultural education hall where not only the security forces themselves, but the administrative staff have to attend regular meetings to be indoctrinated into the North Korean culture and the lives and history of the Kim clan. Over on the left here, you can see the prisoners lined up here and here. And once again, you see the troops I mentioned earlier. You can see the tracks from vehicles coming in and out to these buildings. Here's that close-up I had mentioned. Now, I didn't go and count them, but these are prisoners lined up shoulder to shoulder for the most part. These are slightly separated. There are additional groups here. And given that this was taken right around noontime, a little before, a little after, I can't remember exactly, there's probably some organizational movement for meals at this point in time. And that is the end of my little presentation. And I want to point out that what this proves to us, you know, and this is objective assessment. We have a well-kept facility, and it is definitely a detention facility. We see that is being actively used for the detainment of prisoners. And by North Korean standards, it's actually a well-maintained facility. And it is more than just a prison facility itself. There's some sort of administrative headquarters type activity associated with it. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Amanda, Doohyun, and Craig.
So thank you very much, Joe. You made this point in the press release we issued yesterday. This methodology has come a very long way. I remember a few years back, the UN Special Rapporteur, Tommaso Quintana, was asking us, where are the people? By the way, he was at HRNK last week. We had a really good event with him. And the open source resolution of the imagery we publish has been improving constantly. We have reached the point where you can see prisoners and guards in the satellite images. And as you pointed out, Joe, a few years back, we were even able to combine ground imagery with satellite imagery of the same detention facility. It was Dandong, I believe, with the great help of our colleagues in Japan, Mr. Ishimaru and Asia Press. So we are making very good progress. And this is a winning methodology and a winning strategy. Before I turn it over to you, Amanda, please allow me to acknowledge the virtual presence of our board members, Ambassador Robert King, former U.S. Special Envoy for North Korean Human Rights, Dr. Marcus Nolan of the Peterson Institute, and also author and senior advisor Bob Collins, joining us from South Korea. With your permission, my mother, Dr. Scarlatoiu, as well, has joined us for this program. So Joe and Amanda, you have been working with Joe and the team for so many years right now. We'll look forward to your comments during the discussion section. On to you, man. Please go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Greg, and I'm honored to be here with you and Joe and Doohyun, of course. And I wanted to say thank you to Maria, our intern, for the graphic design work as well. Joe, it's always remarkable to me that you can really help us see things more clearly and things that we may not have grasped otherwise. So with that in mind, I just want to make a few points about our report. The first is that this is the first time we've looked at this camp in detail and published a satellite imagery report on it, which makes it important and groundbreaking, I think, but also, I hope, helpful to the loved ones of prisoners or former prisoners who have been detained at Camp Number 3. When we interviewed people for this project, it was relatively easy to find former prisoners who had been repatriated by China and spent time in interrogation facilities in the Sinŭiju area. But it was really difficult to find people with knowledge of where they were actually detained and interrogated because they, number one, usually weren't from the area, or two, and also two, they were not allowed to see where they were being transported to. However, we've been really fortunate to have insight from a former resident of Sinŭiju and with knowledge of the locations of these facilities, including Camp Number 3. So as Joe mentioned, we want to continue over time to build upon this baseline report, and hopefully that'll help other people, including family members of victims, have a better understanding of Camp 3. Second, as discussed, this is a re-education through labor camp, and we see evidence, direct evidence, I think, of Kim Jong-un's policies of re-education through forced labor, showing prisoners standing outside of the entrances of one of the entrances to the camp, as Joe highlighted in his presentation. And based on repeated testimony, we know that prisoners at these types of facilities are forced to work under inhumane prison conditions, causing great suffering and sometimes to the point of death. Former prisoners at other prison facilities told us that they were lined up and counted early in the morning before being marched around to conduct hard manual labor for the day. They repeatedly told us that they had little to eat and worked without proper equipment, only to repeat this grueling day again the next. And so, as we have seen in our monitoring project, these camps, because of the forced labor, are also an important part of North Korea's economy and the supply chain there. However, part of the point I would make is that people, of course, should not have to die in the name of this policy of re-education through labor, which is what a sentence to a Kyo-hwa-so can amount to still in North Korea. This is 100% preventable by the North Korean leadership, particularly Kim Jong-un and the Ministry of Social Security leadership, which Joe discusses in under the organization section of the report. Finally, as Joe taught me early on, the imagery gives us a look into a slice in time. And so we must try to understand what's happening around an area or facility to enhance our understanding of what we're really looking at here and that in this moment in time. So in the context of COVID-19 and trade in North Korea, I wanted to mention that there are a couple of reports recently, one by Radio Free Asia, saying that authorities have told residents, including in the Sinŭiju area, to tighten their belts and eat less until 2025. And of course, that's a very long time and quite alarming. But this article said that someone in the Sinŭiju area said authorities emphasized that the possibility of reopening customs between North Korea and China before 2025 was very slim. And then on the other hand, an article by NK News recently said that on the Chinese side, across from Sinŭiju and Dandong, there are signs of potential upcoming trade because of plans for the construction of a new land port. I can share those articles if anyone is interested. So this means that while we must continue to monitor this area in the context of COVID-19 and the trade situation, this can also help inform our views about the prison here and elsewhere in North Korea. We know that prisoners are already severely disadvantaged and lack adequate food and medicine. And these kinds of reports about trade or lack of trade should make us even more concerned about the situation of prisoners inside this camp number 3, because that means that we can assume this means that prisoners will have even less access to food and medicine that is really necessary for their survival. And I wanted to say that Roberta Cohen recently wrote an article on this for HRNK. It's on our blog, and she recommends that donors, international agencies, and NGOs develop a joint strategy that prioritizes the goal of reaching the most acute cases of hunger and disease in North Korea, which are, of course, are found in its prisons. So all of this to say that this report provides additional evidence and documentation of the operation of North Korea's prisons. And we will continue to monitor this location, as Joe and Greg have already said, and while calling on North Korea and other governments to help make improvements inside the country. So thank you very much.
Amanda, thank you very much for your remarks and for your great work on this particular project and many other projects. Also, thank you for mentioning the article by Roberta Cohen, our co-chair emeritus, available on HRNK's online publication, HRNK Insider. Before we proceed with Doohyun's remarks, let me remind our distinguished audience that you may ask questions either via the chat function or the Q&A function, and we definitely look forward to your questions. Thank you, Joe and Amanda. Doohyun, you have rather unique knowledge about this particular detention facility. One trend that the research and investigation led by Joe Bermudez has highlighted over the past many years, the past 9 years, is the sustained, if not increased, enhanced economic importance of the slave labor, the forced labor that's centered on North Korea's detention facilities. So Doohyun, since you lived in the area and you're familiar with the area, what do you know about the type of economic activity going on at this particular prison, at Tucson, Kyo-hwa-so?
Thank you, Greg, for having me here. And thank you, Joe and Amanda, for your great job on this project. Actually, I heard the prisoners in Tucson, Kyo-hwa-so make winter padded coats, winter padding. I have no guarantee it is 100% sure, but it makes sense because there's a big chemical fiber factory and textile factory in Sinuiju. The two factories are shoes, so there are many cloth factories in Sinuiju. So it could be sure the prisoners make cloth. Cloth could be uniforms for the military or toll processing products ordered from China. They also farm. When I was in middle school and high school, we had to go to farm and help farmers. I still cannot forget that I was impressed by the cornfield nearby the Tucson, Kyo-hwa-so. The field's soil was so soft that I couldn't even find a pea-sized stone. So we asked the farmers, why the soil is so good? They said, this cornfield had been used by Kyo-hwa-so until recently. This fact shows how the prisoners are subjected to hard work.
Doohyun, that is truly revealing. Your observation about the soil quality is really important in its connection to this particular detention facility. Doohyun, all of us are familiar with your personal story and your family story. And I know that this is going to be a really difficult, a really tough question for you. Based on your very personal experience, what can you share about the treatment of prisoners at Tucson, Kyo-hwa-so, at this particular detention facility?
I visited the correctional officer's housing area to meet an officer who was working at the Tucson, Kyo-hwa-so. Because when my father was in a detention center in Sinuiju, we found out he would be sent to the 토성리 교화소. So we met an officer and asked him to take good care of my father when he arrives there. But when my father was taken to the 토성리 교화소 by the policeman, the 교화소 didn't accept my father because they believed my father would die very soon. It was true that my father was almost dying because of the torture he got in the detention center we called 구류장. He was down to 66 pounds. The 교화소 didn't want to dispose of the body. So in this situation, do you know what the policemen did? They already knew that my father could be refused by the prison. So they prepared bribes to give the 교화소 officers. The bribes were cigarettes. Money, cigarettes, and drugs are the main bribes in North Korean society. But even with the bribe, the prison still didn't accept my father. So police had to send him home. And then at home, my father wrote and sent the complaint letter to the party. Because of the complaint letter, he was taken away and we could not see him again. He died in a North Korean prison. He was sentenced to 8 years, but died after 2. The North Korean government said we could claim his body when the full 8-year sentence was complete. But the 8-year sentence, that didn't happen. The truth is, the North Korean government never returns the bodies of so-called traitors to their families. Naturally, I couldn't even bury my dad's body. The bodies of those who died in prison are cremated and spread in mountains or rivers. My story is not unique, and it didn't happen 100 or 200 years ago. At this very moment, there are thousands of people in North Korea, like my father and our family, suffering from this kind of oppression and human rights violations.
Every time we hear a story and the stories of countless others who lost family members, loved ones at the hands of the Kim regime, reminded why we do what we do. Of course, Joe's history goes way back to what his father was doing to bring justice to Europe and Europeans immediately after World War II. Doohyun mentioned he tried hard to bring your father to this particular detention facility, to Tucson, Kyo-hwa-so. What do you know about the prisoners' living conditions there compared to other detention facilities? Is it possible for the families to bring food to these detention facilities? Is it possible for family members to make life a little bit better for those in detention?
Yeah. If prisoners' families have some money, they can support prisoners with food. Of course, all the food you send will not go to your family who is in prison. Some of them are taken by officers. As you saw in the correctional officers' housing area, not only do the prison guards live there, but also the local farmers. They are mixed. Some rich prison guards moved to the city, but still many of them live in those two areas who are much poorer than those in the city. The officer we met was very poor. When I walked into his home, I could see puffed corn flour we called 퐁퐁이 가루. As soon as I saw the corn flour, I knew it was from prison. This powder is one of the most frequent food items that families provide for their family members in detention facilities. Families put some candies or mix with sugar with the powder and send it to prison. Prisoners have time to eat the powder only sent by their families once a day. If prisoners don't have family or are not supported by their families, life in prison is much more difficult to survive.
Doohyun, thank you very much. We have spoken with you, with family members of former prisoners detained within North Korea's vast system of unlawful imprisonment. As you said, the fact that a Kuryujan police-type detention facilities involves shorter detention, it doesn't mean that crimes against humanity are not committed there. This happened throughout the system. We're, of course, intrigued to see prisoners in the satellite imagery that we're publishing today. Did you come across any prisoners while you were living in the area?
Yeah. When I found the two groups of prisoners who are coming back from work to prison, it was very familiar to me because sometimes I could see prisoners walking back and forth when I passed around the prison. Sometimes prisoners are mobilized to help nearby farms. They have to line up and walk like the image shows when they go to work for work or come back from work. Also, their uniforms are gray and they wear the same color hats. That's why you can see that the top of the head looks a little bit white in the image. When I say they are coming back to prison, it's because the front line is lined up perfectly, while the back line is a little bit messed up. This is because the class leader or guards usually stand behind them and follow them. The image of the prisoners shows clearly Kyo-hwa-so No is still operating.
Thank you very much, Doohyun. We are now ready to proceed with our Q&A. Once again, please ask questions via either the Q&A function or the chat function. I see that we have a question from our own Teresa Kim, who is currently in Berlin, Germany. She's a member of our team. Her first question is, it was interesting to hear from all the speakers how imagery has vastly improved over the past few years. This is clearly a Joe Bermudez question. Joe, how do you see imagery available as open source imagery improving? How do you see this imagery improving in the next few years? If so, what kind of improvements do you and the satellite imagery team hope to see? So what would help move forward and add innovation to our current research methods? Joe, this is clearly your question. Please go ahead. Thank you, Teresa.
Well, thank you, Teresa. At present, we are dependent upon older declassified satellite imagery, which has a resolution of approximately 2 or 3 feet. They have not released satellite, US government or nor any other government has released satellite imagery of any significance over North Korea. And the US government has not released anything from like 1984 all the way up to present time. Commercial satellite imagery, high resolution satellite imagery, came into being in 1999 and has been growing tremendously, especially in the past several years. So today, we have the best satellite imagery that can be collected by law is 30 centimeters GSD, ground sensor distance. What that means is if 2 pixels side by side on the camera in space, on the ground, what they image is 30 centimeters apart, okay, a little more than a foot. These satellites are actually capable of much greater resolution. It's just that they, by law, can't do that at the present time. Going forward, we imagine and we predict that these restrictions will be lessened and we will get down to 15 centimeters, which would provide a much greater ability to determine what we're looking at. One of the things that's happened in the past 5 years is the growth in the number of civilian and commercial satellite companies that are out there. At present, there are at least a dozen that provide satellite imagery. Most of this is, from 1 meter down to about 50 centimeters. And when we get to 50 centimeters, that's where we can really make it, a determination of things that are happening, at least for the purposes of monitoring prison camps. What we see, though, is they're edging towards that 30 centimeters. In fact, Airbus has recently announced that they're going to be producing 30 centimeter imagery, and companies like Planet have produced imagery that is in that 50 centimeter range and is trying to get to that 30 centimeter range. The significance is that we now have the ability to look across multiple sources and see more imagery of the same location than we ever had, and that's only increasing exponentially. We are working actually with some of the satellite companies and telling them what we need and what we would like to see. So hopefully they'll listen to us and we'll eventually get what we're asking for.
Thank you, Joe. Doohyun, Teresa thanks you for your insight. She thinks, like all of us, that your insight is truly, honestly heartbreaking. She wishes to thank you for bringing awareness to these heartbreaking issues. Teresa also has a second question. Amanda, perhaps you want to take this one. How does the North Korean regime attempt to refute satellite imagery evidence? Teresa's asking about literature. Of course, I would recommend all of the reports produced under this particular HRNK satellite imagery project. Joe's work was picked up by the UN Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in the DPRK, and HRNK's and Joe's research was truly essential to anything satellite imagery, including in the UNCOI report. Of course, Joe testified before the UNCOI in Washington during one of those 4 public hearings and continued to work with HRNK on further public events. So, Amanda, how do they react?
Sure. Well, I definitely defer to you and Joe, Greg, but my take on it is I think that's one of the beautiful things about satellite imagery, in that, it's harder for them to refute it. Of course, they try, but that's why we want to continue to monitor these camps and document, not only their existence, but the operations that we can see through imagery, because North Korea in general refutes human rights violations, and particularly in the camps, of course, where they still don't admit to the existence of the political prison camps of Kwan-mi-so. So imagery really helps us always have this evidence available to say, no, this is a camp. We have our imagery experts, Joe in particular, providing analysis that this is a facility. And then, of course, where our methodology remains that we try to pair Joe's imagery analysis with former prisoner testimony or former resident testimony, like in the case of Doohyun, with what we can see with our imagery. Yeah, there's a lot of statements that North Korea makes at the UN in particular saying that these are baseless claims, but we always have the imagery to back up this, to refute that.
Thank you, Amanda. Joe, any further thoughts on this topic?
We know for a fact they don't like the work we do, which I guess is a good thing. The intention is to point out some of the grievous human rights issues that are prevalent around North Korea. We see, and this is anecdotal, it's been told to me, that the North Koreans try to influence writers, whether they be on social media or in the press, to deny there are issues in North Korea. Amanda had said it earlier that one of the things I like to say about satellite imagery, it's factual and it's a slice in time. The building is there or it isn't there. I mean, it's as simple as that. And it was there on January 1st. It's not there on February 1st. I mean, this is something that, while you can refute, anybody can refute anything. The reality is that this is evidence. This is evidence that can be brought into a court of law and used. Okay? When we combine it with the interviews with former detainees, this is firsthand knowledge. A former detainee brings in firsthand knowledge. We bring in the factual data of what we see in the satellite imagery. It provides powerful evidence that can be used to bring those who have perpetrated these issues to justice. And that is the claim. I mean, that is what we intend to do. That is, we're supporting it. And I should point out for those of you who don't know, our reports, not only mine, but the others that HRNK produces, are used not only, as Greg said, in the UN, they're used by the US government, used by South Korean government, used by governments around the world to bring this issue to the attention of the world. If we weren't doing a good job, they wouldn't be using our work. In fact, we've become the de facto source for this type of analysis and information. And that's somewhat, daunting to me, to have all these people depend upon it. But it's a good feeling to say that, we're doing the right thing. We're making a difference in the world. And I should point out, and Greg hasn't mentioned it, but, the year of COVID, and it's continuing, has strained us all, yet we've still produced. It slowed us down at times, but what we have in queue are a number of reports going forward that I think you, the listeners, the participants in this conference will appreciate. One thing back to the previous question was the quality will also improve, at least of the satellite imagery, which will help the analysis going forward. And one last comment, I want to thank everyone here for their interest and for their support. Greg?
Joe, those are great words of wisdom. And whether we are talking about gaining access and bringing humanitarian assistance to the prisoners, as Roberta urges the international community to do, whether we are talking about a post-regime scenario, branch plans to rescue prisoners, plans to bring humanitarian assistance to the prisoners and dismantle the camps, these are the best blueprints available worldwide. The project that you have led and executed, our satellite imagery project. Going back to the question that you and Amanda have just answered about the reaction of the North Korean regime, Teresa, this reminds me of a good friend of HRNK and a personal friend, Lord David Alton of Liverpool. He's on our International Advisory Council. We featured him even at HRNK virtual programs. He was engaged in a type of engagement described as principled engagement, involving a two-track humanitarian human rights track, also involving quite a lot of concern about the lack of religious freedom, the repression of people of religion, Christians in particular in North Korea. So Lord Alton would talk to his North Korean counterparts, and I'm paraphrasing, ask them, what about those prison camps? And they would say, what prison camps? And he would retort, those prison camps featured in satellite imagery. And the North Koreans would say, those don't exist. And then he would get back to them saying, there are witnesses who used to be prisoners or guards or officials running these facilities. And they would say, oh, those are just escaped criminals, implying admission. Now, of course, the North Korean regime refuses to admit the existence of Kyo-hwa-so political prison camps. The facility we have featured today is a Kyo-hwa-so re-education through labor camp. They officially admit that these Kyo-hwa-so camps exist, and Doohyun, you will confirm that Kyo-hwa-hyun, re-education through labor, is a punishment, actually including in the North Korean criminal code. So these are known facilities that we've investigated through imagery research and escapee testimony, and even the regime of North Korea admits that these Kyo-hwa-so facilities exist. Again, this is a powerful methodology that is quite frankly irrefutable, I have to say, as Joe, Amanda, Doohyun have pointed out today. And we will continue down this path. As Joe said, there are multiple reports in the pipeline. Amanda has already credited Maria del Carmen Corte, colleague, who is currently studying at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University in Medford, Somerville. Of course, she's developing as a policy expert and human rights expert. She also happens to have this talent, graphic design. She has developed tremendously under the guidance and supervision of our colleague, Rosa Partacola. And we're happy to know that she has also joined the team, because there is really a lot of output, and we need a lot of concerted team efforts in order to get all of these reports out there. So now let me go back to our speakers and see if they have any concluding remarks. Jake? Any thoughts, impressions related to our satellite imagery program? When you came to the HRNK gala, your wife told us that you spend long hours looking at satellite imagery, sometimes going to bed very late because you're very passionate about this topic, given your personal history, as a former North Korean as well. So just a few thoughts.
The satellite imagery analyzing is really fantastic. It's amazing. We have to prove with strong evidence, not only for the North Koreans' testimony. So it's really fascinating to me. And then I like to work on the satellite imagery work because all places are familiar for me. So I was happy to work with that. And I'm sure that the recording and documenting the human rights violations by the HRNK has contributed greatly to making the issues in North Korea known to the world. Your interest, concern, and passion for human rights in North Korea is changing the lives of North Koreans. So I plead with you to support HRNK so we can do more and more for North Korean people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doohyun. Amanda.
Thank you, Greg. Sorry about the background noise right now. I want to make 2 points briefly. Greg, you mentioned the first one, but as we see in this type of facility and through former prisoner testimony, the abuses are very egregious in this kind of facility, as well as other facilities, not just in the political prison camps. So we continue to gather evidence that crimes against humanity are happening in a range of facilities types in North Korea. Particularly, I would say, in some of the short-term facilities, like you said, Greg, because that's where people are first brought in and interrogated and tortured. And then the second thing, too, is that, Greg, as you said, North Korea does admit to this kind of facility, the Kyo-hwa-so, and it isn't the punishment, the re-education through labor aspect is embedded in their criminal code. And so one of the things we've looked at, particularly with David Hawk, is that looked for any changes in sentences over the years. And right now, the last criminal code I'm aware of that's been publicly released is the 2015 criminal code. So hopefully soon we can find an updated criminal code from the DPRK to assess any changes in sentences, because I think that can provide some insight as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Joe?
It's tough to follow all the comments by Doohyun, yourself, and Amanda. I just want to say thank you to everyone. You know, I think that everyone who's joined this conference, this webinar, your interest is important to us. Your support is important. And the fact that you spread the word about our work and about the issues in North Korea. Your support is very, very much appreciated. And I'd like to offer, the opportunity for any of you viewers to reach out to us if you have questions. We're here to support you. We're here to bring this issue to the world. So please don't be afraid to reach out to us. Thank you.
Joe, thank you very much. Again, this is a very important location within this project. After all, is the city of Sinuiju, closely connected to both market activities and attempts to escape from North Korea. Under the pretext of COVID, the Kim regime has been cracking down on both. This is a city that always reminds me of the Romanian city, border city of Timișoara, which was basically the knot of contraband during the Cold War. It was closer to the West. Of course, Sinuiju is very close to China, and that's where the 1989 Romanian anti-communist revolution began. This is not a call to arms. This is not what we do. We're a research organization, investigator. That said, history is important. And let me remind all of our distinguished participants that right now we are celebrating, or rather commemorating, the 65th anniversary of the 1956 Hungarian anti-communist revolution. On November the 4th, 1956, overwhelming Soviet military power crushed the freedom fighters of Hungary, the anti-communist revolutionaries. I still remember them. I know that Joe and all of us still remember their legacy. And we also know that no dictatorship will last forever. And eventually, peace, freedom, prosperity, human rights, democracy will come to all people of Korea living in the South and the North. On that note, let me thank our colleague Raymond Ha for running outreach and for running this program as well. Thank you, Raymond. Thank you, Joe, Amanda, Doohyun, Ambassador King, Dr. Noland, and Bob Collins, and all of our friends and colleagues who have once again joined us for this report release. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to getting together soon to feature our next satellite imagery report. Thank you. Goodbye.